Now in our 25th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1328, with a release and air date of Saturday, August 10, 2024. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone. On the air, and on the internet since 1993, serving the amateur radio community with weekly, reliable, amateur radio news and special features, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the premier worldwide amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1328 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Hurricane, now Tropical Storm Debby, comes ashore in Florida and is now causing high winds and torrential rain on the East Coast. We will have a full report. A new satellite constellation for wireless communications is given the okay to launch and operate on a lot of different frequencies, one of which is the 70-centimeter band. The FCC approves the new additional missing and exploited persons code to the emergency alert system. W1AW announces that it will move part of its weekly CW messages to 17 meters. A New York City high school announces that it helped a considerable number of its students get their amateur radio license. SpaceX is awarded a NASA contract to develop a craft to deorbit the International Space Station. The FCC fines a New York City resident $2.3 million for pirate radio broadcasting on FM. Congress approves $7 billion to subsidize low-income internet access. And Dog Day Afternoon is coming soon to amateur radio. We will have the story. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, what kind of a hobby is amateur radio? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us aboard the Wayback Machine to the year 1916, when everyone was sharing very little spectrum and QRM was everywhere, and to witness something called the 9X Rock Island test. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Saliers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, Radiosport, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from Studio A at our headquarters just outside Albany, New York, where we survived Tropical Storm Debby, although our basement is a little damp, this is W2XBS.
And reporting from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, where the Little Bites fudge brownies are our staple food product in the Geek Cave studios now, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'm about to head south to the Huntsville Hamfest, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau here in western Massachusetts, the soggy side of the state where it's been raining so much that even the ducks are thinking about building an ark. I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where we're currently being lashed by the remnants of Hurricane Debby, I'm Eric, KD2, RJX.
And reporting from our ham radio station outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the corn is waist high, but it's not as high as an elephant's eye, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where someone has turned the outside oven clear up to broil this week, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Before we get to our lead story this week, we have some late-breaking news that has just come in. NextNav, a developer of a 3D geolocation service known as Metropolitan Beacon System, a wide-area location and timing technology, designed to provide solutions for vertical location and resilient position, navigation, and timing services in areas where GPS or other satellite location signals cannot be reliably received, has asked that the Federal Communications Commission in WT Docket 24-240 to reconfigure the lower 900 MHz band by creating a 5 MHz uplink in the 902 to 907 MHz band paired with a 10 MHz downlink in the 918 through 928 MHz band, shifting remaining non-multilateration location and monitoring service licensees to the 907 through 918 MHz part of the band. The notice said, NextNav proposes a spectrum swap to trade in its current multilateration location and monitoring service holdings for a single, nationwide 15 MHz flexible use license pursuant to the new band plan. The agency said some 1,500 active non-MLMS licenses are in the band. The FCC seeks comments on all aspects of the NextNav petition, including its associated costs and benefits, the notice said. We seek to develop a robust record and welcome comment on additional related issues that commenters may identify. The notice is an important next step in delivering an innovative spectrum solution in the lower 900 MHz band, NextNav CEO Mariam Soren said. Providing a complement and backup to GPS is critical for safeguarding things we need daily, from location mapping and tracking services, to serving as an important tool for locating emergency callers, to addressing critical infrastructure and national security needs. The FCC comment period in the NextNav petition for rulemaking in NRM docket 11989 is open. Comments must be received by September 5, 2024. And reply comments are due on September 20, 2024.
Leading off our news this week, of course, is the weather on the East Coast. Hurricane Debbie continues to drench the East Coast. With more details on Amateur Radio's response to the storm, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8 IDJ, files this report.
The storm originally made landfall in Florida's Big Bend coastal area just after 11 p.m. on Sunday night, August 4th, as a Category 1 storm near Steinhatchee, Florida. The hurricane was downgraded the following day to a tropical storm and was moving north and east at 10 miles per hour. The amateur radio station at the National Hurricane Center, WX4NHC, the Hurricane Weather Watch Net, and the VOIP Hurricane Net were activated as Debbie slowly traversed across southeastern U.S., dumping potentially catastrophic rainfall over widespread parts of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. On Monday morning, August 5th, nearly 248,000 homes and businesses were without electricity. Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, ARRL Northern Florida Section Manager, reported that Clay County Emergency Service Aries was also active. Arch J. Thames, W4CPD, Northern Florida Section Emergency Coordinator, reported that Alachua County and Franklin County Aries were also activated. Thames reported an amateur radio operator was stranded due to high water in Suwannee County. He used the statewide repeater network SARNet to relay the information, and a monitoring operator in Jacksonville, Florida, was able to coordinate with an urban search and rescue team with an embedded ham radio on board and was able to facilitate the rescue of a family. Rick Palm, K1CE, editor of the ARRL Aries Letter, was at his home in Fort White, Florida, when the storm hit. It was another wild ride with huge trees down and river levels rising fast, Palm reported. For 2 days, lots of heavy machinery rolled into our neighborhood to solid down trees and restore power. The Five Flags Amateur Radio Association, W4UC, located in Pensacola, Florida, was asked by state officials to serve as HF backup for the SARNet system, even though they were outside of the warned area. Tropical storm Debbie, now off the Atlantic coast, will move through the Carolinas and then northeast from the mid-Atlantic states into New England. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Palm also reported to the town shelter and worked with Darren DeMarino, K04DLN, and had contact with Brad Schwartz, N5CBP, who is the emergency coordinator stationed at the EOC radio room. He managed to send a field station report via WinLink to the EOC in Lake City. Palm said he was a little rusty but got the form to go through. Colorado State University meteorologists released an updated forecast Tuesday, August 6th, for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season, the day after Hurricane Debbie made landfall in Florida's Big Bend. Forecasters reduced the number of named storms slightly from the July forecast, from 25 to 23 named storms. All other numbers remain the same, including the predicted number of major hurricanes, which stands at 6.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
David Gallatly, KM20, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Hudson Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, appointed Gallatly to the remainder of the term ending in December 2024, following the promotion of former Vice Director Ed Wilson, N2XDD, to Hudson Division Director. Gallatly has been active in amateur radio since 1998. An ARRL Life member, he is a member and past president of the Albany Amateur Radio Association, treasurer of the Hudson Valley Contesters and DXers, and president of the Albany County Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service Radio Club. He served for over a dozen years as Section Emergency Coordinator of the ARRL Eastern New York Section. His interests include contesting, chasing DX, ARRL Field Day, award chasing, 8-band DXCC, WAS, hunting and activating POTA, instructing license classes, assisting in VE sessions, and staying active in emergency communications and public service activities. Gallatly is retired Senior Vice President of WAMC Northeast Public Radio, a regional network of stations, where he had a 35-year career. He was responsible for operations, programming, and finance of the NPR member stations. He earned ABA in Communications and MS in Education from the University at Albany, as well as a certificate in Management Development for Public Broadcasting Executives from the Wharton School of Business and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Upon retirement, WAMC Newsroom was named in his honor. Gallatly was the station's first news director. The ARRL Hudson Division is comprised of the ARRL sections of Eastern New York, New York City, Long Island, and Northern New Jersey.
The FCC has approved the launch of a low Earth orbit communications array of 5 satellites on V-band that is expected to open the door for U.S. smartphones to make use of space-based cellular broadband services across the nation. The satellites have been given the go-ahead to operate in the 37.5 to 42 GHz range for space-to-Earth communications, and the ranges of 47.2 to 50.2 GHz and 50.4 to 51.4 GHz for Earth-to-space communications. Approval was also given for the use of 430 to 440 MHz for space-to-Earth and Earth-to-space transmissions. Also 2025 through 2110 MHz for Earth-to-space transmissions, and 2200 through 2290 MHz for space-to-Earth transmissions. The approvals are granted to Texas-based AST Space Mobile for what the company is characterizing as the largest communications array in history in low Earth orbit.
The FCC has created a new emergency alert code for radio, television, and wireless phones to help find missing and endangered persons who aren't covered by AMBER alerts. We reported earlier that this vote was pending. The commissioners approved unanimously. Like the AMBER alerts that are geared for finding children or silver alerts to help locate seniors, the new alert is focused on people over the age of 17 who are endangered or who have been abducted or kidnapped. In 2023, more than 188,000 people went missing who fall outside of the criteria for AMBER alerts. The new Missing and Endangered Person, or MEP alerts, would function much like the AMBER alerts that have worked since 2002. The FCC says alert originators, such as local public safety officials, would use the emergency alert system by selecting from a group of event codes based on the nature of the situation. The new rules create a new MEP alert code for missing and endangered persons who do not meet the criteria for an AMBER alert. Broadcasters would not be required to relay MEP alerts. Similar to AMBER alerts, silver alerts, BLU alerts, and other add-ons to the emergency alert system, stations will only need to transmit the alerts they desire. But if they do, the FCC says radio and TV stations will help mobilize public attention and recover abducted children. And it believes the new alerts will enable a more rapid and coordinated response to incidents. FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel said that the AMBER alerts have been around for nearly 3 decades and are among the most effective initiatives the FCC has had to help with recovery of endangered kids. With the help of radio, television, and wireless phones, she said they have demonstrated that EAS can be used to help locate others. AMBER alerts demonstrate that there is a way to raise awareness when someone goes missing and increase the odds that we safely find them, Rosenworcel said. Because while only 1/3 of those who go missing are adults, they account for 70% of people who are never found. The issue of missing adults is particularly pronounced in Native communities. The Bureau of Indian Affairs estimates there are more than 4,000 cases of missing and murdered American Indian and Alaska Natives that are unsolved. And the FBI says Native Americans comprise 2.5% of all missing person cases, despite being only 1.2% of the U.S. population. As of August 5th, there are 77 reported missing persons in the Navajo Nation dating back to 1972. However, it is unknown how many others have not been reported to the Navajo Nation Police. Lavina Willinez, the Amber Alert coordinator from the Navajo Department of Police, thinks the new alert will help. Testifying at the commission meeting, she said the same approach used for Amber Alerts can be applied to help locate missing people who are older than age 17 that don't meet the Amber criteria. To give broadcasters and others impacted by the new EAS code, the FCC will give broadcasters 12 months to come into compliance. The order, PS docket numbers 1591 and 1594, recognizes the need for some time to get the system up and running. That includes allowing equipment manufacturers time to prepare the encoders and decoders used to be able to process alerts with the proposed MEP event code. The FCC estimates as much as $12 million may be spent to implement the system. The FCC says EAS equipment manufacturers will incur some cost in making the new event code available to all EAS participants. But it notes that most stations can avoid most incremental implementation costs by downloading the new MEP event code in conjunction with a scheduled software update.
Charging that he ignored an FCC enforcement action late last year, the FCC has amplified its sanctions against a Bronx broadcaster, imposing a penalty of $2.3 million. According to trade publications, the commission says that Johnny Peralta has been operating an unauthorized FM radio station in the Bronx for 6 or more years. According to the Radio World website and local media, his broadcasts as La Mia Radio on 105.7 FM are designed to serve New York City's Dominican audience. Having received no response from its previous enforcement action against him, the FCC has issued a forfeiture order, confirming the $2.3 million fine it is seeking. That fine was proposed last November in a notice of apparent liability by the Commission. The notice followed the FCC's documentation of antenna installations through photographs and numerous field strength measurements taken by field agents. The Commission says the broadcaster did not respond to that earlier notice. Enactment of the Pirate Act 4 years ago gave the FCC greater powers of enforcement against unlicensed broadcast radio, and the ability to impose a higher fine. The Commission does not collect these fines, however. That is the responsibility of the U.S. Department of Justice, which it intends to contact within 30 days if Peralta does not respond to this latest action. According to the Radio World story, the FCC is confident that this is one case that might draw more immediate attention from justice officials because of the amount of the fine. It is the highest allowable amount under the 4-year-old federal law. On January 24, 2020, the Preventing Illegal Radio Abuse Through Enforcement Act, or Pirate Act, became law and was codified in Section 511 of the Communications Act. The Pirate Act gives the FCC additional enforcement authority, including higher penalties against pirate radio broadcasters and any person who permits the operation of pirate radio broadcasting, of up to $100,000 per day per violation, up to a maximum of $2 million.
Beginning on Friday, September 6, 2024, Maxim Memorial Station W1AW will begin using a new 17-meter frequency for its scheduled CW transmissions due to increased activity near the current bulletin frequency. In order to reduce the possibility of interference, W1AW will move to 18077.5 kHz.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
SpaceX will develop an enhanced version of its Dragon spacecraft for NASA to deorbit the International Space Station at the end of its operational life, which looks to be sometime in 2030. This development comes as part of a contract awarded to SpaceX on June 26th, valued at up to $843 million. The new spacecraft, known as the United States Deorbit Vehicle, or USDV, was detailed by NASA and SpaceX officials at a briefing on July 17th. The USDV will be based on SpaceX's existing Dragon spacecraft, but will feature a redesigned and larger trunk section with additional thrusters. Specifically, the USDV will have 46 Draco thrusters, including 16 for attitude control and 30 for the maneuvers required to lower the ISS's orbit. Sarah Walker, SpaceX Director of Dragon Mission Management, explained that the enhanced trunk section is twice as long as the regular one. The new trunk will house engines, propellant tanks, power generation, and other systems, storing 6 times the propellant of the current Dragon spacecraft and generating 3 to 4 times the power. It's almost a spacecraft in and of itself, Walker noted. Once completed, NASA will own and operate the USDV, which will be launched to the ISS shortly after the station's final crew arrives. After its arrival and successful checkout, ISS controllers will allow the station's orbit to naturally decay. The final crew will depart when the station's altitude decreases from its current 400 kilometers to 300 kilometers. The ISS orbit will continue to decay over approximately 6 months before NASA uses the USDV for a final controlled deorbit, targeting a remote ocean corridor about 2,000 kilometers long. Dana Weigel, NASA ISS Program Manager, mentioned that debris from the station, ranging in size from a microwave oven to a sedan, is expected to survive re-entry and splash down in this corridor. The USDV will have an estimated mass of over 30,000 kilograms, including 16,000 kilograms of propellant. Due to its size, it will require a heavier class of rocket than the Falcon 9 currently used for Dragon missions. NASA plans to procure the launch vehicle separately at least 3 years before the launch. SpaceX expressed readiness to support the launch if given the opportunity. Northrop Grumman was the only other company to bid on the USDV. NASA's source selection statement indicates that Northrop's bid was significantly higher in price and rated lower in both mission suitability and past performance compared to SpaceX. Ken Bowersox, NASA Associate Administrator for Space Operations, expressed satisfaction with the proposals received, noting that he was pleased with the submissions from SpaceX and Northrop Grumman.
It is time for the monthly Volunteer Monitoring Program report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the July 2024 activity report of the VM program. 2 licensees in Florida received notices to stay off repeaters in Boca Raton, and the case was referred to the FCC for further enforcement action as appropriate. Uncoordinated repeater licensees in Virginia and New Jersey received advisory notices concerning interference to coordinated repeaters in their areas. The owners are taking steps toward resolution. A licensee in New York received an advisory notice about single sideband operation below the permitted frequency of 14.150 MHz. A licensee in New Jersey received an advisory notice concerning interference to an HF net and his refusal to comply with the net control directive to cease using the net. He was also warned that his license renewal date was imminent and that administrative review of his license application, if filed, would be recommended to the FCC. A GMRS operator received an advisory notice for operating on an amateur repeater in Tennessee after being requested by the repeater owner to stay off the repeater. Any further operation will be referred to the FCC. An operator in South Carolina received a commendation for activities on the Grand Strand Amateur Radio Club repeater operating on 147.100 and 441.775 MHz. The operator participated as net control for the first time, on short notice, and managed all check-ins in a timely and efficient manner. An operator in Louisiana received an advisory notice for operation with an expired license. Technician class operators in Indiana, Idaho, and Mississippi received advisory notices for operating FT8 on 40 meters. Technicians may operate only CW on 40 meters. We would like to thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
Small satellite companies that have grown out of the new space boom are retiring the CubeSat platforms that made them to focus on larger, more powerful, next-gen small sats that promise to unlock new possibilities with advanced AI and real-time laser-based inter-satellite communications. Over the past 15 years, small satellites have revolutionized how things are done in space. Built quickly from cheap off-the-shelf components and small enough to hitch an affordable ride to orbit on the back of bigger missions, these devices and the young, agile new space companies behind them taught the old-school space industry a few lessons. Satellites started small. The first U.S. satellite, Explorer 1, launched in 1958, weighed only 14 kilograms. But the technology, prized for opening a whole new perspective on our planet, quickly bulked up, enabled by the increasing lifting powers of fast-evolving rockets. Soon, complex satellites the size of a school bus took over, observing the planet from above, broadcasting TV signals across continents, and sensing the environment around them. It was only in the mid-1980s that researchers renewed their interest in smaller satellites with masses of tens to a couple of hundred kilograms. The true small-sat revolution, however, began in 1999 with the invention of a CubeSat. Based on standardized satellite units of 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters in size, CubeSats opened space to anyone with enough technical skill to assemble and operate them. Soon, university teams from all over the world began launching their own experimental spacecraft to provide their students with hands-on space tech experience. By 2014, San Francisco-based Planet Labs launched its first commercial constellations of 28 3U Earth-orbiting CubeSats called Doves. More than 120 Doves are in orbit today, capturing an image of each place on Earth more than once a day. Other companies followed suit. As of today, CubeSats have made it to orbit around Mars and the Moon and observed the impact of NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test into the asteroid Didymos in 2022 in real time. Larger small satellite platforms, up to 500 kilograms in mass, have also grown in popularity. In fact, these large small satellites today dominate space around Earth thanks to SpaceX's constellation of Starlink internet beaming satellites. Consulting firm Novaspace predicts that 26,104 small satellites, including mini satellites of 100 to 500 kilograms in mass, microsatellites between 10 and 100 kilograms, and nanosatellites as light as 1 to 10 kilograms will launch in the next decade. And although the smallsat revolution is already behind us, new technologies are emerging that promise to supercharge the sector in the coming years.
There is still time to register for the 2024 USA and International Amateur Radio Union Region 2 Radio Orienteering Championships to be held in Chelsea, Michigan on October 5th through the 13th. The regular registration deadline is August 15th, and the late registration deadline is September 15th. All radio transmitter hunters, from beginners to experts, are invited to participate in a full week of radio orienteering or amateur radio direction finding, competition, and other fun events. There will be competitors from the United States, Canada, Australia, and China. The schedule includes the following: a 2-day training camp coached by course designers Charles and Nadia Charlot, the weekend of October 5th and 6th. 2 practice days, October 8th and 9th. Cultural and social outings to Henry Ford Museum and the Ford F-150 factory on October 7th. Cider mill and German restaurant visit on October 10th, among other opportunities. There will be an informational meeting, guest speaker, and casual dinner on Wednesday night, October 9th. The schedule includes 4 days of challenging championship-level racing, including prior USA Orienteering champs and team trial venues on October 10th through the 13th, consisting of sprint, fox soaring, and 2-meter and 80-meter classics. And finally, a search and rescue exhibition team contest will be held on October 12th. This year's event director is Joseph Burkhead, KE8MKR. He is a 2018 World ARDF Championship bronze medalist, 2019 144 MHz Classic M40 national champion, and has competed as an athlete for the USA Radio Orienteering team. He also competed on the Armed Forces USA Orienteering team at the 2013 World Military Orienteering Championship in Exjo, Sweden. Burkhead is a member of the Southern Michigan Orienteering Club.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. After a bit of an email drought, I received an email from Teresa, KA9IFQ. Teresa writes, I listen to your DX podcast and I hear you mention the gray line all the time. Joe, WAGEX, says that there is no more fruitful time to be on the air than the twice-a-day gray line. What is it and why is it productive? Well, Teresa, that's a great question, and thanks for listening to the DX Mentor and This Week in Amateur Radio podcasts. The best explanation of the gray line comes from an article published by my friend, Jay, K4ZLE, and I've added some of it below with his permission. Quote, the long gray line, otherwise known as the twilight zone or the terminator, is the band of transition from daylight to dark on one side of the Earth and from dark to daylight on the other. Gray line conditions exist for 30 minutes on each side of local sunrise and sunset and act as a conduit for radio signal propagation for frequencies below VHF. That gives us 2 hours per day for gray line communications. It is especially effective for work on 160, 80, and 40 meter DX. As fall and winter approaches, evening DX is most effective on these lower frequency bands. The gray line works because the D layer is absent in the twilight zone, and it's the D layer that absorbs medium and high frequency signals and is fading rapidly for the area in dusk and not yet formed for the area in dawn. This gives boost to signals as they pass through those layers, and there's nothing there to attenuate them. For gray line work, we should orient our antennas to radiate north and south. Depending upon the date and whether it's sunrise or sunset, the actual gray line follows a path 23 degrees east or west of north or 23 degrees east or west of south. The twilight zone extends completely around the Earth and signals can travel in either direction. Unless you have a highly directional antenna, do not worry that there's this 46 degree wide path. The half-power beam width for a half-wave dipole, for instance, is 78 degrees, and a vertical radiates equally poor in all directions. Be sure to check both north and south paths to determine which has the strongest signal." End quote. Joe, W8GEX, suggests 1 hour on either side of sunrise. I often find myself asking Siri, "Hey, what time is sunrise tomorrow?" Then I plan my trip to work accordingly. I hope that answers your question, Teresa. Thank you for the email. And if anyone else has a question they'd like us to address, you can drop it to me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Often people will ask me if there's a written copy of the information that I present. There are so many call signs, dates, and URLs being discussed, you could never remember them until such time as you could write them down. I use most of the same data that you hear in the DX Corner for the weekly DX column in the Ohio Section Journal. If you just Google ARRL Ohio Section, you will find the Ohio Section website, and you can subscribe to the weekly journal and get most of this information. The actual website is arrl-ohio.org. This is a free journal, and you don't need to be an ARRL member to receive it. You won't get the well-rounded, complete information that you get from This Week in Amateur Radio podcast, but you will get my DX information. So here's what's happening in the world of DX. This section of DX News comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, the only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll take care of it. The big DXpedition that is currently QRV is Palmyra and Jarvis Islands, using the call November 5 Juliet, N5J. After being off the air for 34 years, it is now QRV, beginning operations just after 0 Zulu yesterday, August 7th. After 5 hours of setup, they started off with 3 stations, and before their sunset, they had 6 stations ready to go. They plan to continue operations of the next 12 days. While August is not the best time to work KH5 on top band, this is the only time we have. To make it easier to work them, here are some key points. Number 1, they will only have 1 station capable of 160 meters, and that's what they're calling their local 1. The time of year and the cycle favor the high bands, and there will be demand for local 1 on other bands. Therefore, the station will be on 160 only during certain times of the night. At their sunset at 0600 to 0645 Zulu from North America, sunrise from 0800 to 1000, and if conditions warrant, at our sunrise for a possible East Europe opening at 1600. After 1000 Zulu, we will stay on 160 if traffic warrants it. Otherwise, we will QSY to 80. These times will likely change as we gain experience with the conditions. Note for North American stations, don't wait for your sunrise. From about 1000 Zulu, JA stations will start coming in with possibly very strong signals. You will have a much better chance before 1000 Zulu, and that is why we will start early at 0800. Most of you know this, but when you hear your call sign correct and 5NN, just reply with 5NN. Don't send your call because it will create uncertainty. Also, when calling, it is better to send your call twice, especially if conditions are poor and the pileup is dense. Also, we're likely to have a lot of local noise, and you may as well since it's summer. The Somaliland de-expedition team, 6 Oscar 3 Tango, is now scheduled to be QRV in September. Some websites are saying September 9th to the 30th, but these dates are not precise, says team leader Fabri, IV3JPP. As reported in the news, Somalia is a very dangerous place, especially in the capital of Mogadishu. The team is going to be QRV from a safe northwest location. They could be there earlier or later than the dates being teased around on the internet. Likewise, their ending date is also adaptable. The 6 Oscar 3 Tango Ops have plane tickets with flexible dates and are in contact with local authorities who will have to ensure the team's safety. So our thoughts and prayers are with you guys. I hope you pull it off, and I definitely hope that you're safe. So we have a quick update on the St. Paul Island Charlie Yankee 9 Charlie de-expedition. Murray, WA4DAN, delivered the first load of gear to northern Nova Scotia yesterday. The St. Paul Island Lighthouse Museum graciously offered to store the gear in the basement of their building in Dingwall. WA4DAN toured the lighthouse that was once on St. Paul Island and has been beautifully restored by Hamilton Carter. Hamilton gave a personal tour and detailed the history and the work required to repair and reassemble the lighthouse in Dingwall. We are very excited. 7-3s, Murray, WA4DAN. And we certainly wish them the best. Lance, W7GJ, says that ZD9 authorities hope to be able to let him know by Monday, August 12th, if his berth from Cape Town next month is still available for his 6-meter EME de-expedition to Tristan da Cunha and Gulf Islands, otherwise known as Zulu Delta 9. And we certainly hope Lance is able to get that berth and get this thing going. Good luck to you. So we have 2 opportunities to work Greenland coming up. OZ1 DJJ Bo should be QRV now from Greenland in grid locator FQ56OM in his spare time as OX3LX. He's not sure how long he will be there, but he will spend as much of his spare time on the air as he can. Quote, "They're doing it again," end quote, says the OX7A team. They plan to return in November, presumably centered around the CQ Worldwide DX CW contest. Stay tuned for details. So we have quite a bit of information coming up about the African continent and a lot of countries that are being activated. So let's give that a run. We first start with some news from the Ivory Coast. TU5ML Mustafa, also known as TA2IMG in Turkey, has been living and working in Tijikan. He is often joined on the airways by others, such as a company intern named Yijit, using call sign TU/TA2YGT, and TU5JZ Matrin. Mustafa says that most of his activity is on the QO100 satellite, but also HF sideband and digital. They are waiting for some gear to be sent to them from Turkey, including a commercial antenna for QO100, an HF transceiver, and some accessories. They hope to have all of that equipment within a week. F5 NVF and F5 RAV are planning a holiday-style CW and FT8 operation as Tango Yankee 5 Charlie from Benin from October 2024 to February of 2025. Benin's a little harder to work than many, so if you get a chance to work the TY group, you should do that. HA50A Pista reports that he now has LOTW certificates for his upcoming Zulu 22 AO operation from Zimbabwe, 9J2 AO operation from Zambia, A25 AO operation from Botswana, and Victor 51/HA5 AO Namibian African Tour. So good luck to Pista. He's a great operator, and this will be a fun tour to follow him around on. X-Ray Victor 1 Tango Eddie reports his noise level on 6 meters is down, and he soon plans to be QRV on 6 meters from Vietnam, EME, looking for North America and Europe. He has recent, quote, tested and succeeded with EME QSOs with ZS4TX and ZS6NK in South Africa, says N7NR Dave. Eddie uses the call sign X-Ray Victor 9 Tango when on EME. If you are someone who likes podcasts and or YouTube episodes, the DX Mentor has an episode with one of the team leaders, N1DG Don, of the Jarvis DXpedition that's currently underway. We did that recording a few weeks before they took off, and it is very interesting. Check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts by searching on the DX Mentor. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.
Coming up next, This Week in Amateur Radio is presenting another chapter of A Century of Amateur Radio, Hams, Organizations, Events, Inventions, from the mind of Chris Cordella, W2PA, and his editing team. Each episode will bring a different aspect of early amateur radio history. Coming up right after station identification, here on This Week in Amateur Radio.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 14th segment of Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Hams, Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. I want to thank Chris Cordella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website in the preparation of these programs. Now, here is the next of many chapters of Ham Radio History. Cooperation and QRM. In mid-February 1916, coincident with Maxim's second article on relaying, one of the first organized relay tests was run. With everyone sharing very little spectrum, cooperation was the only way to avoid QRM, a constant fact of life at the time, and here weak, distant signals. In a rare cooperative operation between an amateur group and the government, a relay test was conducted on Washington's birthday by Colonel W.P. Nicholson, 9XE, at the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois, and included many other stations. Its straightforward goal was to show the United States government that the amateurs of the United States were in a position to cooperate in radio work by relaying a single message across the country and delivering it to various state governors and city mayors. In preparation, U.S. Navy Station NAA even sent a warning about QRM. A plan was worked out after considering hundreds of suggestions by potential participants, QST noted. Considerably diplomacy was necessary in handling the situation, as a certain amount of jealousy was found to exist between special stations, first-class amateur stations, and the little fellow with the gas engine coil and a few dry batteries. Relay stations' locations and approximate ranges were plotted on a map and covered most of the U.S. except for some of the western desert areas. On 18 February, as the time for the first test approached, QRN at 9XE was the worst in recent memory, surprising considering the season. Besides the static, 9XE reported being bombarded at the start by requests from the press, including the Associated Press, for copies of the message, which he refused to provide until after it was sent. At 11 that night, the text began, and every amateur in the country was quiet. Truly a remarkable thing, he observed. The message, QST, 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 day 9XE, da-di-da-di-da. QST, relay MSG. A democracy requires that a people who govern and educate themselves should be so armed and disciplined that they can protect themselves. Signed, Colonel Nicholson, USA. A group of Boy Scouts helped 3XC receive the Rock Island test message in Philadelphia. The Washington's birthday on Rock Island test was judged a success despite numerous errors in relaying, particularly the spelling of the colonel's name. The message reached the West Coast in 55 minutes, the East Coast in 5 minutes after that, and sooner at various points north and south. Amateurs had bounded the United States in 1 hour that night, an impressive accomplishment. The New York Times reported that the message had been received at Williamsburg, Brooklyn by A.R. Bodar at 1:30 a.m. and would be delivered to the mayor. The exercise, it said, had tested the preparedness and skill of the 25,000 licensed amateur wireless operators. They were only off by a factor of 5. 9XE's account in QST included a collection of reports contributed by participants, some illustrated with small cartoon drawings. Amateurs reported delivering the message to their state governors, some of whom were awakened at 2 a.m. to receive it. Such was the importance of the message in the test. One operator in Washington, D.C., had delivered it personally, written on an ARRL message form to the White House. Maxim star stations, those capable of working 100 miles or more, began to surface along with a large group of regulars. By April, the first trunk line managers had been announced, simultaneously spanning the continents and the generations. Arthur A. Hebert, 2ZH, a 42-year-old steam industry engineer in Nutley, New Jersey, was appointed manager for lines C and D, the two East Coast branches. And 19-year-old R.H.G. Matthews, 9IK of Chicago, would manage Line A, spanning the northern route linking Boston through Chicago to Seattle, and Line E running from Chicago via Houston to Los Angeles. Both men would go on to serve in leadership positions in the ARRL, and one to start a famous radio company. Monday and Thursday nights were designed for trunk line tests, and results were to be reported to HQ. The QST editor predicted big things will now be happening in the American Radio Relay League, and everybody who has a real wireless set and who is a real American will see that he is identified in this linking up of our entire country. No one can afford to be out of it if he has any wireless pretensions whatsoever. The first results of trunk line operation were reported in May in the form of station lists in order of connection, noting where there were gaps and asking for volunteers to fill them. By August, the East Coast lines were complete. The persistent QRM problem led one participant to suggest that the lines ought not to be structured around cities, but around the locations of the best stations. That might result in more reliable critical links and would avoid the QRM of the most populated areas. Included in this material are quotes from the following: 9XE, Washington's Birthday Amateur Relay Message, QST, April 1916, page 65. Air Bear's Message of Preparedness, The New York Times, February 22, 1916. Trunk Line Managers Appointed, QST, April 1916, page 77. A. Hebert, Monthly Report of Trunk Lines C and D, QST, May 1916, page 95. With great appreciation to W2PA Chris Cadella for the use of his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Published flight manifest indicate that the Chinese amateur radio satellite ASRTU-1 has been scheduled for launch in November of this year aboard a Russian rocket. As always, launches are subject to a wide variety of variables, and space agencies are not always 100% forthcoming about their activities. So while you may not want to mark the calendar just yet, hopeful signs are pointing towards a launch in the coming months. ASRTU-1 is a 12U CubeSat mission designed by Russian and Chinese university students for education in amateur radio. Harbin Institute of Technology has successfully developed several amateur radio satellites, including Lilac Sat 2, Lilac Sat 1, DSLWP-A, and DSLWP-B. The partner institution is Bowen Moscow State Technical University, which constructed two satellites, Bomenets-1 in 2006 and Bomenets-2 in 2017, both of which unfortunately failed to reach orbit due to launch failures unrelated to the satellite payloads. The amateur radio station on board ASRTU-1 will provide FM and telecommand uplinks, as well as FM, telemetry, and digital image downlinks. A new SDR-based transceiver was developed to provide communication and experimental resources to radio amateurs, including a VU-FM transponder, a UHF telemetry downlink, and a 10.5G image downlink. The repeater uplink will be on 145.875 MHz FM using a 67 Hz PL tone. Downlink will be a 435.400 MHz FM. The telemetry beacon will be on 436.210 MHz using a 9K6 BPSK. In addition to the FM repeater, the satellites will also provide an open telecommand system to allow radio amateurs to send commands to control the satellite to take and download images. X-band image downloads using 1 megabytes per second or 10 megabytes per second QSPK will downlink on 10.460 GHz. ASRTU-1 has been scheduled for a Roscosmos launch from Vostochny Cosmodrome, Asiatic Russia, in Q4 2024 into a 530-kilometer sun-synchronous orbit. Downlinks and the repeater uplinks have been coordinated by the International Amateur Radio Union.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Having been a licensed member of this community since 2010, I feel qualified to answer a recurring question. What kind of hobby is amateur radio? The single best answer I can give is that it's big. The deeper you become involved, the bigger it gets. I stole the phrase amateur radio is 1,000 hobbies in one, and I've remarked that I suspect that it's underselling the experience. Point being, whatever you've heard about amateur radio is likely true, and guaranteed to be only part of the story. There was a time when amateur radio was a concept regularly seen in general discussion. That's no longer the case, but you'll soon discover that amateurs are everywhere, and the things we get up to still make the headlines from time to time. That said, as a community we tend to use complex language and in specific ways. For example, a radio amateur is unlikely to broadcast, instead they transmit. From the outside looking in, the two are synonymous, but within amateur radio the two couldn't be more different. Broadcasting is one-to-many, transmitting is one-to-one. Broadcasting separates the operator from the equipment. Transmitting has the operator actively engaged with it. Amateur radio is about curiosity, about trying things, about learning and sharing. It's about technology, electronics, nature and physics. It's about software and hardware, about camping and competing, and plenty more. And with that come friendships that seem to last a lifetime. Perhaps forged in the fire of fascination, perhaps made almost perchance in passing. I have more amateur friends than not, and among us we have a massive variety of interests. Unlike most hobbies, you need to obtain a government-issued license to become a fully licensed amateur, as in be permitted to transmit. For some, this requirement might be a deterrent, but once you understand why, since radio waves don't stop at political boundaries and every human shares the same radio spectrum, licensing becomes a necessity, not an obstacle.
That said, you can start long before then by receiving. No license required. Amateur radio is a global activity. It's centrally regulated but administered locally in each country and locality. As a result, I cannot tell you specifically how much things will cost where you are, but the fees are generally not cost prohibitive, and in many cases they are low or even free. You become licensed by completing a training course, passing an exam, and receiving a certification that lasts for life. Once you are certified, you can apply for a call sign and operate an amateur station. The closest equivalent to a call sign outside the hobby is a car license plate. It's a unique combination of letters and numbers that identify an amateur. For example, my call sign is VK6FLAB. Said phonetically, it's Victor Kilo 6 Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo. We use phonetics because often individual letters are lost due to interference, which comes in many different forms. Depending on where you are, a call sign might be subject to a renewal fee. If doing a course and passing an exam seems scary, getting started at the introductory level is generally a weekend worth of effort. That introduces the notion that there are different levels, or, to use an amateur phrase, classes, which again, depending on where you are, permit different access to the radio spectrum, where your Wi-Fi, mobile phone, garage door opener, emergency services, aviation, satellite and free-to-air television all share the same limited resources with radio amateurs. The higher your license class, the more access you get, but the more you become responsible for. Again, using a car analogy, you graduate from moped to car to truck. If you've come across this hobby before, you should consider that one of the historic international license requirements hasn't existed for decades, namely Morse code. Mind you, some countries still require Morse, but their numbers are dwindling rapidly. There is an often repeated concept that amateur radio is old white men sitting in the dark talking to each other about the weather, their station and their ailments. While there's some of that around, you'll soon discover that there's people from all walks of life, all ages and interests and backgrounds. Given that this is a global experience, you do not need to limit your interactions to people within your local community. I've been contributing a weekly article about amateur radio since 2011, detailing the many and varied aspects of this hobby, and if you're curious about what you might find here, warts and all, jump in. There are two series of articles, what uses an F-call, which covers 2011 to 2015, when it was renamed to Foundations of Amateur Radio. Available as an audio podcast, as text, as email, and there are ebooks too. You'll find plenty of amateur radio resources online and social media communities with different interests and sensibilities. As with any community, amateur radio has its share of gatekeepers who hark back to the days of yore, some literally, some in their language and behaviour. Don't let that dissuade you from exploring this magical community. Feel free to drop me an email, cq@vk6flab.com, and I'll do my best to answer any burning questions you're left with. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
ARRL continues to develop the highly successful ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. With more on this story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
As is done with new equipment in the amateur radio hobby, a prototype is being tinkered with this week, TI-3. Third phase of the program is centered around space. Teachers who have each been through the previous versions of the program are at ARRL headquarters in Newington, Connecticut, to test the program. ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, said that having the experienced educators on hand to test out the new training is invaluable. This is really about taking a step further, providing a highly specialized form of training. We've developed a good program, but you never know how well something is going to work in practice until you try it. The educator hams of this first cohort couldn't be happier to experiment with it. I like that it's a small group and that it's laid back and that we're all in it, knowing it is a beta group, so if something doesn't go exactly as planned, the people that are here are very flexible in changing what we're doing. said Megan Tucker, KQ4MAM, Dean of Curriculum, STEAM Specialist at the Hillsborough Charter Academy in Hillsborough, Virginia. Tucker learned all 3 of her amateur radio licenses since last October, and she says, for me, as someone who has been very dialed into aerospace, it's nice to get into something that's a little more technical. I was petrified coming in, and the best part about that is once you're here and you're with other people, you see that everyone had different strength, and it's possible. Educators have built and released pico balloons, antennas for radio astronomy, and other more advanced projects within amateur radio. The cohort will cap off the week with a field trip to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Haystack Observatory. More information can be found at www.arrl.org/ti. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology is funded entirely by gifts to the ARRL Education Fund.
The good old-fashioned game of soccer used to be a simple affair. 2 teams of 11, plus a few subs who were all wrangled by a referee and a couple of helpful linesmen. Long ago, these disparate groups lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed. Now technology is being used to adjudicate all kinds of decisions, and fans are cheering or in an uproar depending on how the hammer falls. That's only become even more prevalent in recent times, with smart balls, the latest controversial addition to the world game, with their starring role in a recently held Euro 2024 championship more than evident. Adidas has been a pioneer of the so-called connected ball technology. This involves fitting matched balls with sensors which can track the motion of the ball in space. According to Adidas, an inertial measurement unit is suspended in the middle of the ball. This is done with a delicate structure that holds the unit stably in place without impacting the performance of the ball. Powering it is a small battery that can be recharged using an induction system. The IMU runs at a rate of 500 Hz, allowing hits to the ball to be measured down to tiny fractions of a second. The ball also features an ultra-wideband radio system for position tracking in space.
You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at www.twiar.net.
As ARRL continues to empower teachers to bring amateur radio and radio technology into their classrooms through the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, many generous donors have stepped up to enable the work. For more details, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, at League Headquarters.
Parents can make all the difference in someone's success. David Ginsburg, N3BKV, knows that well. His parents, Hai and Mimi Ginsburg, supported his passions. Whether it was my mom driving me to the planetarium for weekend classes that allowed me to learn about the universe, or to my father taking me to my first Hamfest and his support of this hobby, they saw my passion for amateur radio and how it gave me a focus to learn about science, computers, and electronics through it, he wrote. David knew he wanted to pay that forward to honor his parents' dedication to fostering curious minds while supporting the future of amateur radio. He chose to establish the Hai and Mimi Ginsburg educator position within the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. The program equips teachers to incorporate amateur radio and wireless technology into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM curriculum. The TI is funded entirely by donor contributions through the ARRL Education Fund. Teachers pay an application fee, but all other costs of transportation, lodging, and course materials are covered, and it costs $4,000 to send a teacher through the program. David Ginsburg wanted that to happen in the name of his parents. They knew the power of knowledge and believed in supporting teachers when they were both alive through many charitable endeavors, he said. The first Hai and Mimi Ginsburg educator is Danielle Adler, K6FIN, Doctor of Education. She is the founder of San Diego Youth Science, an organization that partners with many schools to advance youth involvement in marine sciences. Dr. Adler is excited to take the knowledge she gained in TI back to the young people as she impacts so many that they can get their hands now on with radio. Providing students with ways to participate in an authentic science is incredibly impactful, and radio science can be a wonderful and relevant tool, wrote Dr. Adler in a thank you letter to David Ginsburg, citing the impact his parents' legacy will continue to have. In the last 3 years, 175 educators have attended the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. There are 7 cohorts of the program in 2024, but the goal is to scale it to 10 for 2025. There's demonstrated success with this program and a great opportunity to continue growing, said ARRL Director of Development Kevin Beal, KE8EAL. By having the support of people like the Ginsburg family, ARRL will continue to enable educators to grow ham radio in the generation that will likely take humanity to Mars and beyond, said Beal. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
More information about the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology can be found on the League's webpage.
On August 1st, 2024, Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, ARRL Education and Learning Manager, took a train trip to New York City to visit the Staten Island Technical High School. To tell us how the high school licensed a large amount of its students at a VE session, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
He was there to help administer amateur radio exams to 49 students, and all of those students passed their exams. Several upgraded their licenses from general to extra class, and 2 students went from unlicensed to extra class, all in one sitting. Their teacher, Everton Enriquez, KD2ZZT, attended the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology, TI1, last year, and TI2 this year. Since then, Enriquez has helped over 100 kids successfully test for their amateur radio licenses. He has built a program incorporating HF, local repeater use, fox hunting, and space communications, and has plans to incorporate mesh networking with his students this coming school year. On August 6, 2024, Enriquez was helping his students build antennas to help make contact with the International Space Station. They made a 5-element VHF bad boy antenna with a mounting mechanism to rotate and pitch the heading using 3D printed materials, PVC, and aluminum rods. They tried using an IC2730A VHF-UHF radio on medium power, but while that didn't go as well as planned, they were able to hear a lot of activity on 70 centimeters. Staten Island Technical High School began as a New York City public high school in 1988. Its student body is comprised of lifelong learners, innovation facilitators, contributions to the betterment of society, and intellectually inquisitive young men and women. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
In September of 2005, the school was granted the status as New York City's 7th specialized high school by the New York City Department of Education. New York City's specialized high schools are composed of the most academically gifted and talented students.
Andrew Milluzzi, Ph.D., KK4LWR, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Southeastern Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, appointed Milluzzi to the remainder of the term ending in December 2025, following the recent death of former Vice Director Jeff Beals, WA4AW. Milluzzi works for Walt Disney Imagineering as a Senior Ride Control Systems Engineer. He earned his Ph.D. at the University of Florida in Electrical and Computer Engineering, focusing on high-performance computing. Milluzzi has been active in amateur radio since 2012. He remains active in his collegiate club as a board member for the Alumni and Friends of Gator Amateur Radio. Milluzzi volunteers with Youth on the Air and is a co-advisor for the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio program, along with his brother Tony Milluzzi, KD8RTT. They have supported the program since 2017, extensively networking college amateur radio clubs and students. Milluzzi has served on the ARRL Public Relations Committee since 2018. He is an ARRL Life member. The ARRL Southeastern Division includes Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. First up this week is news from SpaceX. SpaceX is now targeting mid to late August for the launch of Polaris Dawn, a mission founded by billionaire entrepreneur Jared Isaacman. The upcoming flight, which will employ SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft and Falcon 9 rocket, have been slated to lift off no earlier than July 31st. SpaceX announced the delay on July 26th during a press conference focusing on the company's upcoming Crew 9 astronaut mission to the International Space Station for NASA. The NASA mission will include Zena Cardman, KJ5-CMN, Nick Hague, KG5-TMV, Stephanie Wilson, KD5-DZE, and Alexander Gorbanov, Roscosmos. Crew 9 will launch no earlier than August 18th, and Polaris Dawn will fly sometime after that, the company said. The Polaris Dawn mission is scheduled to include the first-ever private spacewalk. Next up is an interesting story from the U.S. military. AMSAT is reporting that the U.S. military is installing modular state-of-the-art satellite jammers capable of disrupting Russian or Chinese communications should the need arise. Even though the hardware is ground-based, the U.S. Space Force will oversee installation and operation. The technology is already past prototyping. The military tested the system at 2 different locations earlier this year. The Department of Defense allocated funds to build 24 remote installations, with 11 scheduled to deploy before the end of the year. Back to our friends at SpaceX with a report that its Falcon 9 returned to flight with 3 Starlink launches in 30 hours after only 15 days of being grounded due to its recent upper stage anomaly, which was a brittle and presumably cracked pressure monitoring line, and conducted its 300th reflight of a booster. And finally, we wrap up Satellite Shorts with news that Boeing performed a hot fire test of the 27 maneuvering thrusters aboard the docked Starliner space capsule, which could be the last test before the spacecraft's delayed return to Earth is approved. Astronauts Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams, KD5-PLB, took Starliner to the International Space Station on June 5th for what was to have been a 10-day test flight. NASA says they may now return in late August.
During the 2024 Summer Olympics in France, which runs through August 11, amateur radio operators can contact a Special Events Olympic Station. Special call sign TM24PRS from Châtillon, France, will be active by Frank Bernard, F4DTO, and Patrick Bernard, F4GFE, all on the HF bands. Special award QSL cards will be available in 4 categories: bronze for 3 bands QSO, silver for 4 bands QSO, gold for 5 bands QSO, and platinum for 6 bands QSO. The awards are free only by sending a request to f4dto.frank, space F4GFE, Patrick at orange.fr, or via mail to Frank Bernard, P.O. Box 61, Châtillon CEDEX 92321, France. Also, after the 2024 Olympic Games, there will be a special event station for the 2024 Paralympic Games, August 11 through September 8. TM2024JPP will be active on all the bands from 0000 Zulu to 2359 Zulu.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, your amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air, available as a podcast on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartMedia, and Spotify.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. There's a new satellite in orbit. It was built by some 300 students from University of Montpellier in France. It took over a decade to develop and build. It is Robusta 3A, and the main mission will be studying the extreme flash flooding that occurs from the storms in southern France. The satellite carries an experimental attitude determination and control system, or ADICS. This will be used to orient the solar panel for optimal exposure, as well as aim sensors and the downlink antennas. They will also be testing computer memory chips from 3D Plus to see how they withstand radiation exposure in space. There's a downlink on 436.750 MHz, which transmits short bursts of telemetry. It will also be used as a store and forward satellite similar to FalconSat 3, which deorbited in January of 2023. The uplink frequency has not been published as the satellite is still undergoing commissioning. In the meantime, you can listen for the telemetry. The store and forward mode will be 9K6 GMSK AX25 protocol. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly propagation forecast report, brought to us each week by our solar weather prognosticator Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. The average daily sunspot numbers in July were the highest since 2001. A geomagnetic disturbance warning was issued on 23:37 UTC on August 7 by the Australian Space Weather Forecasting Centre. Recent coronal mass ejection activity is expected to increase geomagnetic activity. Increased geomagnetic activity expected due to coronal mass ejection will have effects G1 to G2 on August 9 and 10. The Australian Space Weather Forecasting Centre Bureau of Meteorology said that solar activity jumped quite a bit over the past reporting week, August 1 through the 7th, with average daily sunspot numbers rising from 208.9 to 222.3, and solar flux from 207.3 to 255.3. Spaceweather.com reported that sunspot numbers have reached a 23-year high. Geomagnetic numbers were fundamentally unchanged, with average daily planetary A index shifting from 14 to 15.7, and the middle latitude index from 13.1 to 13.4. 7 new sunspot groups emerged, 1 on August 1st, 2 on August 2nd, 3 on August 4th, and 1 August 7th. So looking ahead at the predicted solar flux for the near term shows values of 275 on August 10th and 11th, 285 on August 12th and 13th, 260 on August 14th, then 205 on August 15th and 16th, and 200 and 185 on August 17th and 18th. And finally, the predicted planetary A index for the near term will be 40 and 15 on August 10th and 11th, then hold steady at 5 on August 12th through the 21st.
In Radio Sport this week, a lot of contests for you. On August 10th, the Fist Saturday Sprint, that's CW. August 10th through the 11th, the WAE DX Contest, CW. August 10th, the SARRL Youth QSO Party, that's phone. August 10th, the Kentucky State Parks on the Air CW phone and digital there. August 10th and 11th, the Maryland DSC QSO Party, CW and phone. Also on August 10th, the 50 megahertz Fall Sprint, CW phone, and that's digital as well. And then on August 10th through the 12th, the MMM on VHF Dubus 144 Meteor Scatter Sprint Contest, CW phone and digital. Remember, you can visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming Section, State, and Division conventions on August 17th and 18th. It's the Huntsville Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention. That's in Huntsville, Alabama. August 22nd through the 25th, the Northeast Ham Exposition, sponsoring the ARRL New England Division Convention. That's in Marlborough, Massachusetts. August 30th through September 1st, the Shelby Hamfest, sponsoring the ARRL North Carolina State Convention. That's in Shelby, North Carolina. And on August 31st, it's the Summer Symposium, sponsoring the ARRL Santa Barbara Section Convention. That's in Carmelo, California.
This week, the Federal Communications Commission announced the launch of a mobile speed test app, replacing the FCC's speed test app to help improve the accuracy of the FCC's National Broadband Map. The new app features repeated testing capabilities, which can be accomplished without the need to certify information before each individual test, according to the FCC's recent announcement. According to the FCC's July 23rd release, the app will now allow for users to conduct hands-free coverage tests while driving. FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel elaborated on the app's capabilities and comments included in the FCC's announcement. Our new app makes it easier to share real-world experience with connectivity, empowering consumers and making it possible for up-to-date and crowdsourced information to improve our mapping, Rosenworcel said. The app also features an in-app map overlay displaying the area where the test was taken, the agency announcement also stated. Consumers deserve to know where they have mobile coverage and at what speeds, and the FCC wants to include their experiences in our effort to make a more precise map of available coverages, Rosenworcel said. The FCC's updated app, now available on the Google Play Store for Android devices and the Apple App Store for iOS devices, provides the ability for users to log into the National Broadband Map and to review their speed test results and see them on a map, the FCC release explained. According to the FCC's announcement, the original FCC speed test app is no longer allowing users to run speed tests. Users of the old app will receive an in-app notification encouraging users to upgrade to the FCC's mobile speed test app.
The 27th Annual International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend is August 17th and 18th, 2024. The event began in 1998 as the Scottish Northern Lights Award run by the ARRL Amateur Radio Group. The International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend attracts over 500 lighthouse entries located in over 40 countries. It is a popular international amateur radio event, not a contest, and there are very few rules. It is also free, and there are no prizes for contacting large numbers of other stations. There are currently 312 lighthouses and their call signs registered. The complete list can be found on the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend homepage, and includes stations throughout the United States. Amateur radio operators may use any authorized frequency or mode as defined by their individual licenses. Digital modes such as FT8 may be used, but because FT8 is a keyboard-to-keyboard mode of communication, the visiting public may not fully understand what amateur radio is all about. International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend guidelines suggest an HF transceiver and a wire-type antenna is a better way to demonstrate amateur radio. The event runs from 0001 UTC August 17th to 2400 UTC August 18th, that's 48 hours. For questions about the event or how to enter, contact event organizer and webmaster Kevin Mulcahy, VK2CE.
With the help of vital information provided by an amateur radio operator, rescue teams rushed to evacuate people from a region devastated by landslides that began in late July in the Wayanad district of the Indian state of Kerala. A VHF repeater set up on August 3rd by the Sultan Bathari DX Association carried location, conditions, and other details to district officials as rescue efforts intensified using drones and radar. HAMS relayed information to district authorities from ravaged communities after being asked by the district coordinator to step in and be a part of the relief operations. Led by Sabu Matthew, VU2ELJ, the association's chairman, the HAMS set up an amateur radio station inside the district collector's office in Calpetta. With cell phone towers washed away by the landslides, mobile phone service was available only in a limited capacity, according to published reports. A press release from the district collector's office said that many lives were saved because of the emergency network. Officials said ham radio messages came to their aid, and the rescue team members were able to facilitate their evacuation.
Now celebrating our 25th year keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
According to DX World, despite their best hopes and plans, a team of seasoned radio operators from the UK had to call off their attempt to activate the sixth most wanted island on the air in Europe, Scotland's Flannan Islands group. The team said bad weather posed safety hazards. The uninhabited islands carried the IOTA number EU-118 and are in the Outer Hebrides. The group is the second most wanted IOTA in the UK after Rockall, where one of the 5 Flannan team members, Nobby, GOV-JG, spent several days in 2023. The Flannan DXpedition has been assigned the same call sign that activators used for Rockall, MM0UKI. The team announced that the weather forecast compelled them to abandon the hoped-for activation, which was to have been calling QRZ from August 1st. The team had already faced an earlier challenge. They had to replace their original vessel, which had developed an engine fault. The boat's skipper later told them that the window for favorable weather was insufficient for him to retrieve them safely, and they would therefore have to return home. They had planned to be on the air for 48 to 72 hours.
Navajo Code Talkers Day is August 14, 2024, and recognizes the contributions of Navajo Marines during World War II. These code talkers encoded and transmitted messages using a complex Navajo language-based code. Secret communication was essential to the war, and the code was never broken by Japanese forces in the Pacific. Special Event Station N7C will be in operation August 14th through August 18th from 0000 hour Zulu to 0000 hour Zulus from Window Rock, Arizona on 14.265, 7.265, and 18.133 megahertz. A certificate and QSL card are available for $5 US dollars from Herbert Goodluck, N7HG, P.O. Box 06, Cheney, Arizona 86503.
Although amateur radio was not taking a significant role as emergency response teams battled the fast-moving wildfires in the Canadian province of British Columbia, the challenges facing Western Canada have been providing some emergency communicators with a blueprint for going forward. Even as they keep an eye on the wildfires threatening the West, the Salvation Army Emergency Disaster Services teams have been working on a comprehensive plan called PACE, for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency to address communications across Canada. Emergency Disaster Specialist for the Maritime Division of the Salvation Army, John Bignell, VE1JMB, said that the plan includes the critical role hams can play in disaster response efforts. Toward that end, the EDS teams are studying IP-linked systems, such as Yaesu Fusion and Echolink, and such technologies as WinLink, so that traffic can be passed even when the communication infrastructure has suffered a failure. John went on to say that we believe that by internal training and developing relationships with local hams and ham clubs in each region, we can significantly improve our disaster response capabilities. The Salvation Army EDS teams see this as an opportunity to deliver what could be needed in the future when a more extensive amateur radio involvement may be needed. Meanwhile, said John, the teams are collaborating with each division to develop a more comprehensive communication plan.
Carter Craig, N3AO, passed away on August 1st, 2024 at age 86. Licensed since 1981, he was an ARRL Life member and Maxim Society member. He was married to past ARRL President Kay Craig, N3KN, for 49 years. Carter's public service communications included appointments as Eastern Pennsylvania Section Traffic Manager and Aries Emergency Coordinator for Chester County, Pennsylvania. After moving to Blacksburg, Virginia, he was active as a Skywarn net control for the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Blacksburg. He participated in statewide weather disaster drills as a voice net control from WX4R&K at the National Weather Service Office, while K staffed the digital communications station. A past president of the Mid-Atlantic Amateur Radio Club in suburban Philadelphia, he was also a member of the Potomac Valley Radio Club. Along with Kay, he taught novice license classes in the 1980s. After 25 years on the faculty of Cabrini College in Radnor, Pennsylvania, he retired as professor of English and Communications. Carter enjoyed kit building, CW, QRP, and outdoor operating. Once he placed his canoe in a stream scarcely deep enough to float the boat in order to operate a water-themed QRP contest, to the puzzled delight of neighborhood children. During Kay's tenure as ARRL president, Carter traveled with her to conventions and conferences in the U.S. and other countries. Someone who never knew a stranger, he made many friends on those travels with whom he stayed in touch on the air and through social media. ARRL extends sympathy to past ARRL President Kay Craig, N3KN, who shared this remembrance. And we too here at This Week in Amateur Radio also pass along our deepest condolences to Kay, friends, and family.
The love of CW was very obvious to any ham who got to know Barry Kirkwood, ZL1DD. On the air from his dream shack, Baz, as he was known, was a sought-after contact among ops on CW, especially for DX stations. Baz became a silent key on June 30th in Chiang Mai, Thailand after a brief illness. Although he had lived in Thailand in 2006, he did not get a Thai call sign, operating first from the RAST club station in Bangkok, which had the call sign HS0AC. When flooding destroyed the station, Barry played a key role in getting superstation HS0ZIA on the air near Chiang Mai, and often participated in contesting from there. He collected boat anchors, but, as a CW op, he also loved his collection of Morse keys. He distinguished himself as an award winner many times in the NZART, Sangster Shield, QRP, CW contest. After learning that the original shield had been lost in the 1990s, he commissioned one to replace it in 2017. Baz was a longtime member of the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, a member of the FIST CW Club and founder of the popular New Zealand Straight Key Night, which is held in summer and winter. He also held the Cambodian ham radio license XU7AEL. The New Zealand call sign known so well among Barry's contacts was not his first. He had been assigned ZL1DR in 1953 and later was ZL1BN. After the death of a friend, Bert, who was the original holder of the call, ZL1DD, Bert's family had asked Baz to take his friend's call sign as his own. He was 88.
The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation on Wednesday advanced the Plan for Broadband Act, which directs the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to develop and implement a national strategy to close the digital divide by expanding access to broadband internet. The bill includes $7 billion in additional funding for the Federal Communications Commission's Affordable Connectivity Program, which provides discounts on Internet service and devices to low-income households before it ran out of funding this summer. The legislation just passed the full Senate. Since June, hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost Internet service because Congress failed to provide additional funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Drew Garner of the Benton Institute for Broadband said in a statement this week, "We know that millions more are likely to lose or downgrade service, resulting in billions of dollars in lost consumer financial benefits and service delivery efficiencies for healthcare providers." The new act is based on a 2022 Government Accountability Office report that found that federal broadband efforts are fragmented and overlapping and recommended that the President establish a national broadband strategy. Vermont has been a leader in coordinating statewide broadband deployment, and the Plan for Broadband Act will bring some of those same strategies that have worked for Vermonters to the federal level to help ensure that every American can access the high-speed broadband they need to thrive, Senator Peter Welch, one of the bill's authors, said when the legislation was introduced in 2022.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
When the long-delayed inaugural launch of the European Space Agency's new Ariane 6 rocket finally occurred on July 7th, it suffered an upper-stage failure that left some payloads in the wrong orbits. Fortunately, before the anomaly developed, the Ariane 6 successfully deployed Robusta 3A, a satellite with an amateur radio payload. The target was a 580-kilometer circular orbit with an inclination of 96 degrees. Robusta 3A is a 3U CubeSat, designed and built by students and faculty of Université de Montpellier in southern France. Over a decade in development involving around 300 students from the University of Montpellier and all over the world, Robusta 3A will be its seventh satellite developed entirely in-house, having learned much from the development and launch of smaller Robusta 1U satellites. The project has offered hands-on training, engineering, and scientific experience to the next generation of space engineers and researchers. The satellite's primary mission is weather observation, specifically to track 7all events. These are intense storms and incredibly heavy rains that cause extensive flooding, often in the form of flash floods that hit the plains and the foothills of southern France. Once considered 100-year storms, they have been occurring with greater frequency due to global climate change. Most of the weather data is downlinked on a commercial S-band microwave frequency. If the data we will be collecting improves the geographic and temporal accuracy of weather forecasts for seasonal events, it would help authorities give early warning to the population and allow rescue services to better target the areas at risk, explains Romain Briand, Assembly Integration and Testing Manager at the University Space Center of Montpellier. However, Robusta 3A aims to do even more than chart water vapor from space. The satellite carries an experimental attitude determination and control system that will seek to optimize solar panel exposure and correctly aim sensors and microwave downlink antennas. Using a set of sun sensors, magnetometers, and reaction wheels in a pyramidal configuration, the system should provide precise attitude control, especially during orbital maneuvers. The satellite will also employ a cold gas thruster propulsion system, which operates with solid iodine as propellant. This system will demonstrate orbit maintenance, phasing, and lifetime extension of small satellite missions, and could also help with end-of-life decommissioning and debris mitigation. As an extra mission, the CubeSat will test how computer memory from chip manufacturer 3D Plus withstands the radiation of space. This French company specializes in highly reliable electronic components, and their computer memory recently landed on the Moon as part of India's Chandrayaan 3 lander. Finally, Robusta 3A also carries a 9K6 GMSK AX.25 store and forward digital system with a UHF transmitter output of up to 3 watts, a very powerful downlink. As the satellite is still in commissioning, operating protocols and uplink frequency have not yet been released. However, amateurs should expect something similar to the FalconSat 3 store and forward system that was popular until that satellite deorbited in January of 2023. Robusta 3A is currently transmitting short telemetry bursts on its International Amateur Radio Union coordinated downlink frequency of 436.750 MHz.
And finally this week, what is being called Dog Day Afternoon is coming to amateur radio this month. The global efforts of amateur radio operators are calling attention to the urgent needs of abandoned, abused, neglected, and homeless dogs by operating special event stations in Europe and the U.S. to mark International Dog Day. This year will be the largest such activation among hams, as Hans YL3JD, who originated the special event, will be on the air as YL1DOG for all of August and September. Chris G5VZ and David G4YVM will be on the air as GB0DOG and GB4DOG, respectively. Listen for Chris on the air until the 26th of August and David till the 27th of August. In the U.S., a team coordinated by Karen KD2GUT will be calling QRZ with the special event call sign K2D from the 21st to the 26th of August. International Dog Day is August 26th. The hams are hoping to spotlight the need for rescue, assistance, adoption, and donations around the world. National Dog Day is celebrated on August 26th each year, but other dog days include National Walking the Dog Day on February 22nd, National Hug Your Hound Day on September 11th, and National Puppy Day on March 23rd. Oh, meanwhile, Cat Day will begin with special event operations on August 8th. Listen for YL1CAT, GB4CAT, and GB9CAT. For more information, visit the website dogdayradio.org.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters all across North America and around the world on great repeater systems like our flagship repeater K2RHI on 146.940 MHz, serving the Tri-Cities of New York State's capital region from Mount Refenesque in Brunswick, New York.
Hi, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN, one of the anchors for This Week in Amateur Radio, and I have a few questions. Do you have a good radio voice? Do you have a quiet recording space, own a professional broadcast microphone and DAW software, and know how to use them? Can you commit to a same-day turnaround when given a script assignment? If you answered yes to all of these questions, and you're willing to volunteer your time to give a little something back to the ham radio hobby, then lend us your voice and join our anchor team for This Week in Amateur Radio. To learn more and see if you have what it takes, contact George Bowen, W2XBS, via email at w2xbs77@gmail.com or look him up on qrz.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.